This presentation is AAC coaching. If that's not what you came for, you can walk out, and I'm okay with that. But you might enjoy it. So yeah. So we're going to talk just real briefly about what AAC coaching is and why we feel like this is so important. Let me do this first. How many people have heard of AAC coaching before? Raise your hand high. Okay. How many people have done it? Raise your hand high. Oh, awesome. A few. Okay. How many people have thought like, yeah, maybe that's something we should, how many people have watched or participated in other trainings on coaching? Okay, good. If you guys have anything to add from your experience, please do this, because we are definitely not the experts, but we figured we would at least talk about it and get a conversation going. So this is how we define AAC coaching. We're working directly with communication partners to help them gain the knowledge and develop skills they need to support AAC learners. And when I talk about AAC learners, I mean anyone who is learning how to communicate using a device, low-tech, pod book, switches, whatever that is. They are learning to use another language of AAC in order to communicate, to share meaning. When we talk about communication partners, we're referring to, there it is. Those could be teachers, SLPs, SLTs, paraprofessionals, peer tutors, family members, anyone who is communicating with students or could potentially communicate with students. They are communication partners, and that's who we're working with, and we'll tell you why. So we have some goals. We developed some goals a long time ago as a team. We have 6 major goals that we wanted to kind of focus our efforts on in our district, and our goal 3 is communication-focused classrooms. We wanted to help create classroom environments where all students are expected and encouraged to communicate, and where communication is easy and rewarding for all students. That's like our way high pie in the sky goal. We're not even close to that, but that's what we're shooting for. And the reason for that, probably the same reason you guys have, is we just see too much. We know how powerful these devices can be, how powerful this language can be for students who have no other way to communicate or who need to clarify the good things they're already trying to communicate. But you guys are probably in the same boat. We walk into a classroom, we gave Ben a device, and it's sitting on the shelf. It's still in the backpack. It's not being used. The aides aren't getting it out. Or, you know, we tried it out for 6 months and the team said, not for us. We're not going to do it. We just saw too much underuse or non-use or abandonment, and we're trying to combat that. And that's a big thing everywhere with assistive technology and with AAC. So we figured we're going to focus on the environment, and we're going to focus on communication partners, and we'll tell you why. So we're going to talk just a little bit about the power of environment and culture on our behavior, because what we're trying to do here is change people's behavior. We're trying to change students' behavior, so that behavior includes hitting those buttons and telling us what they really mean, and we're trying to change the behavior of all their communication partners as well. So just real briefly, what do we mean when we talk about the classroom environment? We're talking about a lot of things here. The physical space, you know, all the stuff that's in the space or not in the space. Could be desks, tables, wheelchairs, standers, play area, mat, whatever, you know, whatever's in that, that's the environment, all that stuff in the space. The people that are in the space, we make up the environment, and the culture of that place. I don't know if you guys have thought about this a whole lot, but every time you walk into a classroom, there's a microculture going on in that classroom. And that culture is made up of patterns of movement and interaction, the rules of behavior, whether those are written or unwritten rules, the values, beliefs, and attitudes of the people in that space, that all makes up the culture. And the paradigms, how everyone sees their world and the lens that they look at their world through, that all makes up the culture and the environment. So why are we talking about that in an AAC presentation? Because of this quote right here. This is a quote by an author named James Clear. He wrote the book Atomic Habits. Has anyone read that? Awesome book. He talks about, the whole point of that book is developing healthier, positive habits. But he talks about how the environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. We tend to believe that our habits are a product of our motivation, our talent, and our effort. Certainly these qualities matter, but the surprising thing is, especially over a long time period, your personal characteristics tend to be overpowered by your environment.
And along with this is, for me, it's changing the environment of some classrooms, maybe not your classrooms, of, oh, communications, that's speech. Oh, AAC, that's speech. So if the classroom environment is AAC goes to the speech room, then the students' AAC environment is, oh, I use this with speech.
Yeah, not here in this room. I do it in that room. Our species, probably you may have heard the term code switching. We talk certain ways in certain environments and certain ways in other environments, and we do code switching with AAC as well. You hear it a lot with students that speak multiple languages. They speak their native tongue at home and another language at school, English at school, here around here. But we code switch with AAC as well, and we don't even realize it, because the environment is shaping our behavior. So the environment can facilitate or discourage interaction, and it can influence our mood. So how does our current environment, I just want to get you guys thinking for a second, this room right here, the people in this room, how is this influencing your mood and interaction? And then think about other places, like what about a public library? What about a busy airport? What about your own home? How does that environment influence your mood and interaction? And all of this is leading towards the $10,000 question. How does your classroom environment influence mood and interaction and shape habits of students and communication partners in there? Oh, we lost the screen. There we go. Okay. Are you guys online seeing the screen again now? Perfect. Okay. So, like I said, all of that is leading up to how does your classroom environment or the environment of the classrooms you work in, if you're a related service provider or someone who is a little more itinerant, influence mood? That's something to think about. Any initial reactions to that question? Okay, that's fine. Oh. I've been saying all year long, if I rubbed a lamp and a genie came out and gave me 3 wishes, my first wish would be that every single classroom was fully staffed, honestly. World peace would be second. Fully staffed classrooms would be first. So I totally get that. It's awful. And then, you know, like a cheese pizza for me would be the third one or something. I don't know, but well, I actually heard the best thing to do is to wish for another genie. And then use your last wish to set the first genie free and just keep doing that. Anyway,
but anyway, the understaffed classrooms, and that's like we talked about in our last presentation, we talked about the communication being important but not urgent. And in an understaffed classroom, that's exactly what it becomes. Because we need to get the goals done, we need to get math done, we need to get the kids where they need to be, but we maybe don't need to sit down with them and talk about their weekend. And so that is definitely something huge. So part of this is including that coaching so that people can add that communication quick and easy, because the more comfortable with it that they are, the more likely they are to model it in those situations that we are too busy, but we can at least touch the go sign as we walk out the door, because we've just modeled AAC in a very busy situation.
So we're going to talk for a minute about that goal of creating a communication-centered classroom culture. And there's a lot of alliteration there, and I love that, if you caught that. So we already know special education classrooms are busy places, stressful places, a lot of stuff, a lot of people, a lot of moving parts, and overlapping and even competing priorities happen in that room through the course of a typical day. So this is exactly what Kate was talking about here. If you were in our other presentation, you've already heard this. So you can check out no, don't check out. It's really important to hear it again. Communication is super important, but it's not always urgent. This little matrix up here, this little table, is what's known as the time management matrix. It was popularized by Stephen R. Covey in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Basically what he says, and he didn't originate the idea, but he made it popular. Everything that we choose to do with our time is either urgent or it's not urgent. And it's either important or it's not important. You can think about everything you've done up to 10:26 a.m. today. Everything that you did today so far was either really urgent, wake up in the morning, go to the bathroom, really urgent, right? Open the phone and scroll through social media for 5 minutes. You get what I'm trying to say there. So we're going to talk about all these quadrants really quick. Quadrant 1 are things that are urgent and important. Those are crises. They're pressing problems, they're deadlines. That's the kid that is screaming and throwing a chair through the window. Someone's on fire. The IEP is due this afternoon. We're having the meeting and I haven't written the PLAF yet. Those are quadrant 1 things that I got to take care of right now because it's urgent and it's important. Quadrant 2 are things that are not urgent, but they're still important. These are things like building relationships, long-term planning, preventative maintenance and other activities, proactive kind of things, personal growth, health and exercise. I'm sure someone in here probably thought last night before they went to bed, I'm going to hit the gym in the hotel this morning. Then they woke up this morning and they're like, yeah, that would be really important, but it's not urgent. I can put that off till the next conference, right? So that's quadrant 2. Quadrant 3 are things that are urgent but not important. Those are a lot of times interruptions, emails, some, I won't say all meetings, but some meetings, popular activities, things like that, that someone's pressing for your attention right now, or something is pressing for your attention, but it's not super important, but it feels that way because it's urgent. And then quadrant 4 are time wasters, trivia, busy work, social media, things like that. And a lot of times we adopt this habit of putting out fires. We spend a lot of our time in quadrant 1. And then we also spend some time in quadrant 3, and then we get exhausted, so we go to escape into quadrant 4. And which quadrant gets left out a lot of time? Quadrant 2. All this is leading up to teaching language. I would argue for most of us is probably a quadrant 2 activity. It's super important, but maybe it's not the most urgent thing in our classroom right now. If Johnny's not telling us what he did or ate for dinner last night or did over the weekend, that's okay because he's not screaming, But we have to make time for language and teaching AAC, or all the other quadrants are going to fill in all that time. If we don't carve out time and make it a priority, then other things are just going to, by default, take up all that time we would use for teaching language.
And then a lot of the things that we teach in language become quadrant 1 because Johnny likes goldfish crackers, and as long as he gets a goldfish cracker for doing his work, then we're all happy. And so requesting goldfish crackers, that's quadrant 1. That happens all day long. We request crackers. Saying the weather is cold, if Johnny doesn't say that the weather is cold, then Johnny gets in trouble. And so Johnny can find the page that says weather cold today. Fabulous. Quadrant 1. Johnny wants to tell you that he wants an iPad for Christmas and mom got it for him. It's the coolest thing ever. We don't have time for that, Johnny. That becomes quadrant 2 because we don't have time for that. So we do get some language. It's not that we're not teaching language, but we're not teaching communication. We're not teaching true language, and that's where we're losing it because we're getting all of the important and urgent communications. We've got those down, and they're going to make it.
And that's an important part of the puzzle, but it's not the whole thing. So that's a really good point, Kate. The whole reason we bring this up, this isn't a time management seminar, but what we're talking about here is we talked about busy classrooms, competing priorities, and how we spend our time is part of the culture of that classroom. It affects our priorities. So we are trying to change and affect classroom cultures so that there's a shift in the focus towards communication, so that we make that more of a priority. We're trying to change beliefs, attitudes, and paradigms of the people in the classroom. And we decided as an AT team that we're in the business of being cultural change agents. We're trying to influence classroom cultures. We didn't start that. That originated out of conversations with other team leaders. I remember the light bulb went off for me a couple years ago when I was actually talking with the team leaders from Davis District, and they were talking about their AAC word of the week. Some of you guys know about that. And they talked about how when they walk into classrooms now, they see more and more devices being used and not on the shelf. And they're like, it took 3, 4, 5 years, but we think that this word of the week stuff is changing, affecting the cultures. And that's when the light bulb went off. I was like, oh, that's what we got to do too. Got to change the culture in our classrooms. So we're going to take a little cul-de-sac here just for a minute and talk about how language develops, how we learn to communicate. This is an oversimplified explanation of how language develops, but it gets the point across. Language is a pyramid. And we start off with the bottom of the pyramid with receptive language. Before we start using pictures, before we start speaking verbally, before we start signing, we hear and see other people do it first. We're just taking it in. We're sponges soaking it in. And after we take in that language, then we start to spit some of it back out. We imitate, we mimic, we make sounds, we gesture, and we jump into expressive language. And then communication partners shape that expressive language with their reactions. They encourage it, they nudge it in the right direction, they may punish it. And we take that as receptive language. We express, we receive, we express, we receive. That cycle goes on and on. The pyramid gets bigger and bigger till hopefully we become independent communicators. But the whole point why I like the pyramid is the fact that you can't have a pyramid with a fat top and a teeny bottom. And the whole point is that language is not going to develop if we don't have enough opportunities to hear and see that language. That's the way language develops. And the reason why I bring that little cul-de-sac discussion up is because it talks about the power of communication partners in language development. Why is the teacher and the paraprofessional and mom and dad and siblings and the nurse and everyone else so important for AAC learners? Because they build the base of that language pyramid through modeling the language skills. They shape that language through their social interactions. They motivate learners to want to use the language. They make it fun, meaningful, and rewarding, or not. And supportive and understanding communication partners can help smooth out rough spots on the journey. How many people here have learned a second language at some point in your life? How many people did it just like that? It was really easy, no rough spots. One person's lying. Maybe you're a savant, I don't know, but there's tricky spots down the road, and supportive communication partners can help smooth out those tricky spots. There can be a lot of tricky spots. So think about, have you had any experiences where a supportive communication partner helped you in a situation where maybe there was a language barrier or a cultural difference, and someone there was kind of understanding, they kind of bridged the gap, and they kind of talked you off the ledge and helped you continue in the journey? That's kind of what we're talking about with our AAC learners that have this device in front of them with all these bewildering symbols. And they're like, you just shove this in front of me and say, okay, use your words. And they're like, what do I do? Communication partners are so important if they're supportive in doing that. So this is my super unscientific graph that I made, my pie chart, but it's trying to communicate a point here. When we hand Johnny a device, we tend to flip this pie chart and we think, okay, Johnny, you are 80% responsible for learning this language, and I'm going to step back and be 20% supportive of you. But it's on you, buddy. When really we need to flip that. Yes, Johnny needs to be engaged and participate, but who's really going to make or break the development of that language system? Communication partners. It's the teacher, it's the SLP, it's the paras, it's the teacher. I said teacher again. It's the parents, it's everyone else. You know, it's grandma and grandpa. Communication partners legit, a lot of times will either make or break an AAC system for students. Has anyone ever experienced that? Seen that? Okay. I got some amens back there. Because we either make that language meaningful and rewarding, so they want to keep doing it, or we can actually make it pointless and punishing. And I've seen both in classrooms. I've done both in classrooms. How many have done both? Sometimes you make it fun and rewarding, other times you walk away thinking, crap, I think I just did some more damage there than. So knowing the power of communication partners, if a classroom environment is full of supportive communication partners, then AAC learners are going to thrive because they're going to be surrounded by all the support. How many people were here yesterday for the keynote speaker with Christian Moore? And he talked about building resilience through having those people to support you. Same kind of thing here with learning language. Learning language has a good deal of adversity in it, I would argue. So the whole point why I bring up the power of communication partners is because we as a team decided we wanted to influence student outcomes. We want to work with students still, but we thought, you know, we might get more bang for our buck, or if we change adult behavior in the classroom to influence the student behavior, which is why we went to AAC coaching. So, questions about that up to this point? Comments? That's the whole point why we started looking into this AAC coaching thing, is we realized if we change the behavior of the adults in the classroom, change that culture, students are going to just be in a more supportive environment and be able to thrive. So here's our origin story. Okay, we're doing well on time. When I decided as team leader that I wanted to take my team down this crazy rabbit hole that we've been on for a couple years, I had no clue about instructional coaching at all. So I was like, okay, I need to find out from an expert. So I went to our Gen Ed district instructional coaches. You know, our district has, I think it's actually 2 small handfuls now of full-time instructional coaches. They work with our brand new teachers, years 1, 2, and 3. They work with them on classroom management, effective instruction, all of these important things. They support them, they coach them, they help them become the kind of teachers that students need in the classroom. And we wanted to learn their special sauce. We wanted to learn how they do it. So this is how they do it, and then I'll tell you how we decided we need to adapt this for our needs, because we're not working on effective instruction and classroom management necessarily. We're working on language skills and modeling AAC. But so their process is evidence-based. It's been well established, and we're like, we're going to learn from them. So it has 2 parts. Number 1 is training. Before they go in the classroom and they coach with teachers, they bring them in for training sessions at the beginning of the year, so they can teach essential concepts and skills, and they can develop a shared vocabulary. So the teachers know what they're supposed to do. They know the words that the coaches are going to use, because then the coaches go in and they start with teacher A, and they say, I'm going to be with you for 2 weeks. I'm going to come in every day. We're going to make some goals. We're going to work on this together, and we're going to shape your behavior in real time in the classroom. I'm going to observe and give feedback. The coach might actually go in and say, I'm going to teach the first part of class so you can see this skill in action, and the new teacher can watch that. You know, and they may team teach. They may both jump in and do this. They're working to helping those new teachers gain their skills. Does that make sense? So the main thing here is 2 parts. There's the training component, and then there's a coaching component. And that was really important for me to learn that, because I would have just jumped into coaching and not understood the training part. So we decided, okay, we're in a little different situation here as an assistive technology team. How do we do that? Our target population are teachers, SLPs and SLTs, paraprofessionals, and peer tutors. Like we said, all of those people influence the culture in the classroom. And a lot of times the people that actually are working directly with students the most are who on that list? Paraprofessionals, right? Yeah. They're the ones that are in the trenches, one-on-one, across the table from those students, interacting. So we wanted to work with those that have the most direct impact on AAC learners. And for the rest of this presentation, we're going to refer to whether it's a teacher, whether it's an SLP, whether it's a peer tutor or a paraprofessional, we're just going to lump them all into the bucket of communication partners, just for convenience. So when we talk about that, we're talking about all of those people, depending on the classroom. So the target knowledge and skills that we wanted them to develop is they need to understand what AAC is and understand language development, understand that language pyramid, understand how learning to use an AAC device is really like learning to use another language. We wanted them to learn how to model AAC for their students on their devices. So modeling just means I talk to you like I normally do, and then I hit a button or 2 on your device to convey the message in another modality. So I might say it's time to go get on the bus, and all I say is I hit the go button on their device because I'm trying to communicate go. Or I like that so much, and so I hit like. That's the modeling. We wanted them to develop that. And we wanted them to learn how to make AAC meaningful and rewarding for students. So our process, a couple disclaimers. We're totally still building this train while it's already running down the tracks. It's been a learning experience. We're continuing to adapt and refine. In fact, when we get back from this conference, we're going to have another team meeting and be like, okay, maybe we need to make a couple tweaks here. So we're not trying to give you a step-by-step guidebook to follow, but we're trying to give you a framework that you guys can adapt for your needs. and maybe learn from you guys too if you're on this journey with us together. We're going to assume that the people on your team that have AAC experience. If not, then they're going to need to be trained before they can be effective coaches. And hopefully that just kind of makes sense. So probably the first step in AAC coaching is just to get to know the classrooms. We spend a lot of time talking about classroom culture. You need to know classrooms and kind of know what's going on in that classroom. Who are the AAC learners? What systems are in place? What are the experience and attitudes of the teacher, of the SLP, of the paras? How much complexity is in that classroom? You know, some classrooms are a little more chill or less complex than other classrooms. That's important to know. Think about a lot of different things there. How much support are they getting? What are their inclusion efforts? And there may be other factors you consider as well. Just getting to know the classrooms that you may work with as an AAT team. Because once you get to know the classrooms, then you can decide which classrooms you're going to focus on. For us, when we started this journey last year. This was my crazy idea for the team, and they went with me. And they haven't run screaming out the door yet, but there's still time. We actually started with an easier classroom. We started with a teacher who already kind of got it, and she'd already done a lot of training with her paraprofessionals on AAC. And that was awesome for us because we were learning how to coach. So we could walk into that environment, into that culture, and just be like, you guys are already doing so many great things. We're just going to take your skills and just build on them. That was really nice for us starting out, figuring out how we were going to do this coaching thing. We kind of chose a ringer classroom, if that makes sense, and started there. And you may want to do that as well. We need to prioritize the needs of teachers and students. You know, you can't hit every classroom all at once. You may be in a big district with probably not hundreds of schools, but with lots of schools. You may be covering multiple districts. You need to prioritize however you're going to make that decision. Are you going to take your entire team and focus on one classroom, or are you going to kind of divide and conquer and have a couple people from your team go to this classroom, a couple people go here? Those are decisions you need to think about as a team. And how you approach this may change over time. You know, classrooms change, we have turnover, different students come in and out, different paraprofessionals come in and out, so we've got to approach this and adapt and be flexible. So this is our questions or comments up to this point. Okay. No one's asleep yet, so that's good. Our 4-step process, this is the process that we've put in place. Again, it's just a flexible framework. 4 basic steps. The first step is I go in as team leader and I do a coaching overview with the teacher of that classroom and hopefully with the SLP, SLT as well as a team. We'll talk more about that, but we just do an overview at first to kind of discuss the process, to discuss logistics, answer any questions, things like that before the whole team descends into the classroom. After we've done that overview and kind of explained things and gotten some buy-in from the teacher, then the teacher and the paraprofessionals and anyone else in there are responsible for some self-training. We talked about that, how our instructional coaches do training and then coaching. We wanted to do that too, but our training, rather than bring everyone in, is we actually made some videos and put it on our YouTube channel, and we have them watch those videos. And that's their training component. And then after that, we schedule a time to go in and observe the classroom. And that may take anywhere from a half hour to an hour. We're in there for 2 purposes: to kind of look at the bigger culture in general and through the lens of communication and give some feedback to the teacher and SLP, but also to kind of, they've seen our training videos, they've seen how modeling looks in the videos. We're going to kind of try to jump in and work with students on their devices and show them how modeling works in real life in that environment. And then after all that, we pair up and do some one-on-one coaching, several sessions spread over time. So I'll talk about that a little more in depth. So the first step is the overview and planning. This is not an actual picture of me and my teachers, obviously. But the purpose of this is to sit down with them for like 20, 30 minutes and schedule a time and just explain the process. You could do this virtually if you need to. Just explain that whole 4-step process, what we're trying to accomplish and how we're trying to accomplish it, so that we can get some buy-in from them, see if they're interested, see if they're really committed and if this is something they want to do with us. And discuss logistics, like who are we going to work with? Out of all of your paraprofessionals in the room, who do you want to start with first? Because we can't, if you've got 5, 6, 8 paras in the classroom, we can't work with everyone at once. We just don't have the time and resources for that. So who do we want to start with? And then who do we want to get to next? Or do we want to start with you as a teacher first so that you get your skills and then you can disseminate that first? And then so we're trying to discuss the logistics of who are we working with here as coaches? When are we going to do it? Where are we going to do it? You know, so we've had everything from, yeah, we want you to come in during rug time in the morning because that's when all the kids have their devices and that's when everyone's there and you can work with them. Or maybe, you know, Emma goes to art at this time. It would be awesome if you could work with the paraprofessional that goes with her to get this going in the art classroom. We talk about the when and where and who. So that's all the overview. Any questions about that?
We also talk about sometimes the who, but also the what. Like if you have 6 students and they're all using the same communication system, then it may be more training that system. Or if you have 10 different systems, okay, how are we going to come into this classroom and work with this para, but get them ready to use all of the communication systems? So we also look at more than the who, we look at what they have in their classroom, what devices they're using, what low tech they're using, what that is, so that when we walk in, we can also help to train them in how to use the systems that are already in their classrooms.
Do you have any like templates of like paperwork or forms or, yeah, okay, where you do this?
Oh, and I didn't mention that. I didn't mention that at first. If you go to the Sketch app, our presentation is there. I should have said that right at the beginning. I forgot. But we also have on there, so we've got our presentation as a PowerPoint and as a PDF. We also have our coaching forms. We're going to go over those in a minute, but there's a packet there of the coaching forms that you can download and kind of tweak to meet your needs and purposes. So yeah, really good question. Other questions? Okay, so after the overview, this is when we say, okay, now you need to have, before we go in and do coaching, you need some training. And so this is just a screenshot of our YouTube channel. We have 5 whole videos on our channel. We're not monetized or anything, obviously. But we have 3 different AAC training videos on there and a couple bonus videos. We ask the teacher, the paraprofessional, the SLP, to watch those videos on their own time. It takes about 40 minutes to get through those 3. And our special ed director has agreed that the paras can get paid for this. We don't want them to have to do this on their own time. You know, it's 40 minutes out of the day to just watch these videos and get a little bit of training on, again, the concepts and the knowledge and the vocabulary.
We also worked really hard to make these as user-friendly as we could, because we wanted parents and paraprofessionals and peer tutors to be able to do them. So we spent a lot of time taking out some of our, you know, cool terms we use and trying to make them to the level. So really concentrate on that. And they don't know what AAC means. They don't know what language stimulation means. So then you got to kind of make it their level too.
So you guys are welcome to use these if you want. They're also on the Utah Assistive Technology Team's YouTube channel. So you can either go to our channel, is called CCSD Assistive Technology. If you just search for CCSD and don't put the assistive technology part in, you may get things from Clark County School District, which is in Las Vegas, Nevada. They've got a lot of awesome things, but that's not our thing. So make sure you go to the right channel, or you can find them on the UAT YouTube channel as well. The UAT's got a lot more things to kind of dig through on there. We've only got 5, and the bonus videos are awesome too. But the training 1, 2, and 3 are kind of the meat and potatoes training that we want people to have. So questions, comments about that? And we, like Kate said, we share this with, we also use these, we share them with parents. I've shared them with a lot of people. So we have them do that training on their own, and then we come in, we schedule a classroom observation, and it's kind of twofold here. We're observing the current communication in the classroom, kind of looking at that big cultural lens, and we're giving feedback. So we'll go in and we have observation forms we fill out. The teams give it to me. I kind of type up a summary, and then I'll email that to the teacher in the SLP just to give them some feedback on, these are things that are going well. This is what we saw. Maybe here's some suggestions on things you could do, or some celebrations, some tweaks, things like that. But while we're there, we also, if we can, we try to actually jump in and get down on the floor with Johnny with his iPad and actually show how we can model in this environment with him as well, so that the parents can actually see it in real life and not just in a video. And then at the end of the classroom observation, so we've had situations where we've had our whole team, 5 of us, I think it was 5 at the time, go into a classroom. We had a lot of students using devices. We had 5 paras, so we all split up. And so I was like, Kate, you go with Emily. Monique, you go with Kaden, and we actually were like, you're going to be with you. And we sit down and we do a brief interview with that teacher or that para. And we've got a real brief form we go through to just kind of gauge where they're at in the journey, and kind of explain things to them, and also to schedule those coaching sessions. So this is where we're laying the groundwork to come back and do the one-on-one coaching at the end of the classroom observation. Takes about 5 minutes or less. It doesn't take very long. Does it take longer than that for anyone? Nope. Okay. It takes a little longer for Kate, but that's okay. She makes it fun though. And then we schedule a time to come back, so that I'm going to go back and I'm going to be with Emily or with Mrs. Johnson or whoever, and say, I'm going to come back on Tuesday at 9 o'clock and I'm going to do one-on-one coaching with you. We've got some pictures actually of some of us doing coaching. We've got Monique in the back. Raise your hand, Monique. There's some pictures of Monique there, working with a paraprofessional and a student on her device. That was a fun day, for good and bad. We got a picture of this weird guy here working with a paraprofessional and a student in a different classroom. We're in there, we're doing the coaching with them. We work with partners during the normal classroom activities, just like the instructional coaches are doing this while teachers are teaching lessons. We're doing it while they're doing groups or rug time or academics or art or whatever it is. We're there to model skills, to observe, to give feedback, troubleshoot, encourage, console, not shame, but whatever we need to do. And then we try to schedule as many follow-up sessions as needed. Our goal has been to try to get 2 or 3 sessions in with a communication partner before we move on. And in an ideal world, we would do a lot more. Our direct district, the district instructional coaches are with the same teacher every single day for 2 weeks. That just doesn't work into our schedules, and it probably doesn't for you either. So we try to do the best we can, but we try to schedule 2 or 3 visits over a 1 to 2 month period to try to get them to a certain point. And we'll talk about those stages we try to get them through as well.
Yeah, and I like this because as a team, we could just talk to the para that we were working with. And my schedule is not the same as Robert's because I teach speech and he's the AT coordinator. So he can move around more. And I have certain times that I can go. I can use my prep time, or I can use my Friday, or I can use my testing time. And then I can talk to my person, and I don't have to go during the UAT time. I can go, well, I've got time next Friday at 2. What are you guys doing? And then we can work it out that way. I also really liked that working with them, it just took a little bit of the mystery away, because you can tell them as many times, you can watch the trainings, but until I sit down with them and I go, oh, so I would just do this when you did that. And they're like, oh, that's all you do? Uh-huh. And then they're like, so if I do that, that's exactly what you should do. Oh, because we build it up too much. So then these poor paras are like, well, I got to be able to say the whole sentence. And they said I don't have to, but I have to have more words than like. No, you don't. So I think this was really good to just kind of take the mystery out and to give the schedule to the people doing it.
Yeah. There we go. So, and so there's parts of this journey where I have the luxury of being full-time AT coordinator for my district, so I can do some of this legwork on my own. There's parts of this for us where I go and do the legwork and I do the overview and I scout out the classroom and I decide where we're going to go. And then we come together as a team to do the observation, and then we kind of split up as independent contractors almost to work with our assigned coachees as we're coaches. And then we try to come back a month or 2 later and just kind of reconfigure and talk about how things are going and decide where we're going to go next. If we're going to keep So, Cynthia might say, I need to keep working with this person. She's getting it. She needs a couple more sessions. Andrea might say, I think my person's good. She gets it. And then, so we say, where are you going to go next? So we try to do some refiguring that way. So questions about that process? Trying to get you, think about how we're doing it, but think about how you could adapt this to your need situation as well. Here's the forms. They're kind of small right here, but like I said, we've got them on the Sketch app, so you can download these as well. The first form on the left is that overview form. So at the top, we've just got demographics, and then our goal we have right there for them to see. We're trying to create classroom environments where students are encouraged to communicate, where it's easier and rewarding. The box in the middle there is that 4-step process. That's the plan. We're going to explain that and walk them through that. And then underneath is the demographics. That's where we talk about who in the classroom do you want to be coached, what times will coaching happen and where. And then we want to make sure that we have time to kind of discuss with them and if there's any concerns. So that's kind of the form to guide us through that. The form over on the right is our classroom observation form. When we're doing an observation, we're just targeting 3 kind of basic low-hanging fruit skills. There, we're talking about number 1, do students have their devices in reach? Yes or no, partial. Number 2, are there other low-tech supports in the classroom besides their device? Because those are awesome to have, whether that be picture schedules or a picture of the Go symbol by the door so they can just tap that on the way out, or a wash your hands diagram in the bathroom, whatever that is, those low-tech supports are an important part of this culture as well. And then number 3 we're looking at is communication with AAC models. Yes, no, partial, and what does that look like, and give some suggestions on how you can tweak this and things you're doing well. That's kind of the basic form that we use. The next form number 3, that's the coaching plan. That's at the end of the classroom observation. We sit down with our assigned person, 5 minutes, and we're just going to walk you through this process really quickly. So in the box there, we have stages of development that we're going to talk about here in a minute. We've got 2 questions, just kind of gauge their level of skill and understanding from a scale of 1 to 5. How well do you understand how to model AAC, and how well do you know the student's device? Just to kind of know what we're dealing with here. And then kind of explain this is what coaching could look like. There's a lot of different ways to do this. And then get into the details of let's schedule 3 visits right now. And then we have room on here as well for follow-up questions if we're to that point, but we don't always use that one.
One other thing we talked about, like at the initial stage when you meet with your para that you're working with the first time, this reminded me of it. We talked to them about what works best for them, because what works best for me is maybe not what works best for you. Do you want me to come model and show you? Do you want me to talk it through? Would you rather just video you with the kid and send it to me on Zoom and I can make comments on the video and you can go back and watch it? Does that work better for you? Does it work better if I watch and then later we talk about it? Does it work better if I talk to you while you're doing it so that we're in the moment? Because everybody's comfort level is different. And so giving them that flexibility of how the coaching is going to look when you're working with them was really helpful.
We haven't done a lot of video in part of coaching at this point. And the lesson I'm learning is if you give the people the option to opt out of being videotaped, they're going to take it every single time. So there may be some circumstances where we just don't let you opt out. We may just say, this is what we got to do as part of this process. But we kind of just get their buy-in and explain it to them. And then this is a form that we use sometimes, but not always. It's just kind of a data form when you're observing, to kind of observe what kind of communicative intents are being modeled, requesting, commenting, greetings, jokes, questions, celebration suggestions, summary, things like that. So sometimes we do that. Other times we're just busy in there with the device and the student and we don't have time to fill out a form. So we have to be flexible with that. We're going to talk about this just really briefly. How many people have heard of s'mores before? This is developed by Jill Center and Matt Bod, some very, very, very smart language people out of the Center for Technology and Language Development. This is copyrighted, so we are not, selling this or recommending it, but we use this more just to help us as coaches work through the process. But s'mores is a process of helping you be a better communication partner, because you're supposed to slow the rate of your speech and then model and then respect what the student is doing and reflect back what they're trying to communicate, both non-verbally and verbally. If they're looking at a cup of water, you might model, "You look thirsty," or whatever. We repeat the same things over and over again because sometimes students need to see something modeled 50, 100, 200 times before it really clicks that that arrow means go. A lot of times they don't need that many for that to click that the M&M means I get an M&M. That's pretty immediate. But other more abstract things, we need to repeat those models. We need to expand on their models. If they're doing one-word utterances, now we can take it to two. And then we can also stop and have an expectant pause as a very gentle, non-invasive prompt for them to respond, rather than a very intrusive hand over hand or use your device, say your words, and then it's an anxiety attack for them. It's just an expected pause and see if they'll fill that silence. So use this if this works for you. We don't try to teach this whole thing to the communication partners we're working with because they don't have time and we don't have time to learn all this. They've got too much else going on. In a perfect world, we would totally do this. Jill Center and Matt Bod in their perfect world, they can do this with people, but we just try to keep these concepts in mind. We also try to keep in mind the AAC core word of the week that has been developed by like the Davis team, the Salt Lake team. If you guys have access to this, this is awesome. If not, talk to Eric Engar and see if you can get access to this. This is just another tool to change the culture. These are daily lessons developed by the Davis District team. The goal is to teach students how to use core words. They focus on one core word a week. One week you're working on help. Another week you're working on all done. Another week you're working on go. And it teaches students, but it also has lots of examples for the communication partners of how they could model those core words. So it's awesome. There's the secondary goal. I already talked about that. This can be taught in a whole class to a small group in a one-on-one situation. There's a lot of ways you can do this. So if you have questions about that, you can talk to us. You can talk to the Davis folks about that. Just another tool we try to use in our toolkit when we're coaching out there. So this is we're starting to realize that there's kind of some stages that people pass through on their way to becoming more supportive communication partners. This is not backed up by like rigorous research. This is just some anecdotal observations we've been making. So I'm not going to like publish this in a peer-reviewed journal or anything, but this is kind of we're hoping the way we go. So most people, you know, if Sally Para is working with a student who's got an iPad with LAMP, the very first thing that Sally needs to learn is they just need to understand what modeling looks like Kate talked about. It's not really as hard as it looks like sometimes. I can just hit the apple and hit eat. And that's all I need to do when I say it's time for lunch. I don't need to make that whole sentence. So they get to the point, hopefully, where they're like, I think I'm finally getting this whole AAC modeling thing. I get how I can do this while also keeping the student in the seat and taking data or whatever else they have to do. So that modeling starts to click in their mind is the first thing. And then number two, they start to become a little bit familiar with the student's device. Because they've been modeling on the device, now they kind of know where some of the core words are. They kind of know what's in some of the fringe folders. Oh crap, we've only got 10 minutes left. We're getting close though. They know how to search for words or those other things. This is the point where they say, oh, I'm not so lost when it comes to his device anymore. And they also kind of overcome that fear and stigma of I can't touch his device, I don't know what's in there. Now they're kind of familiar with it. That all leads to the point where they can start practicing modeling and exploring that device with a student on their own. We're trying to get them to the point where they can kind of be like, I think I've got this. So when you're not here with me, I can still do this with the student. And you don't have to be here holding my hand or holding a gun to my head telling me to do it, right? They're like, I've been modeling on his device pretty much every day. We search for words together pretty often. We're starting to get this. And that's the point we're trying to get a lot of people to. And what would be awesome to get to, and this is, we don't always get here just because we don't always have enough time to spend with people. But this is a lot of, if you watch like the coaching AAC presentations on like ATIA and things like that, they'll talk a lot about like reflective coaching and things like that. And that's where we're just getting people to like kind of self-evaluate and self-reflect and kind of coach themselves in a way, because now they're like, after they're done with the student, they're thinking about, oh, how did I do? What if I did this? That'd be awesome if we get to that point. We don't always get to that point. Sometimes we just get to the point where they're like, yeah, I can explore this on my own, and then we move on to another classroom or another person in the classroom. But that's kind of the stages. Questions about that? Comments? Okay. So real briefly, we'll just talk about what it looks like. You got to have flexible options. Not everything works for every person and for every student. So sometimes I will say, I'm just going to work directly with the student and you can just watch me model. That just gives the communication partner a chance to observe. And we often recommend it as the first step, actually. So it helps them just kind of be like, oh, I see what you're trying to do here. Now I can do it. It's awesome if in the same coaching session, you can be like, I'm going to start, and then we'll let you take over. That really works well too sometimes. Then they switch roles. We talked about that. We give feedback. Sometimes we jump back in, and we're just going to help them and prod them, and trying to shape behavior in the moment is the best thing to do there. Sometimes we might team teach. We might both work with the student. We've got the device, we've got the student, and we're both modeling at the same time, and everyone's just touching the device and having a great time with language, and it works great. For some students, that doesn't work very well. They get so distracted. I've noticed, especially for me, when I walk in a classroom, all these little kids are like, it's another dad. And sometimes I'm more distracting than good. So I have to step back sometimes. But you may be that really fun person that just doesn't work so well. So we talked about using video as another option that you have. Takes more time and effort, but it can be really helpful. And you could do distance coaching as well. If you got a lot of distance to cover, you could have them take a video and send it to you. Could have set up a Zoom or a Google Meet, just like we're doing now, and just be like, okay, I'm going to watch you virtually and give feedback through the magic of the interwebs, and we'll do it that way. What kind of feedback do you give while you're coaching? Immediate versus delayed feedback. First of all, showing someone how to do it is always better than telling them how to do it, right? So rather than just say, you could do this, you say, you could do this, and we show them, right? Immediate feedback is always best when possible. If they're working with Johnny and I can get them to make a tweak while they're working with them, they've already modified their own behavior in real time. So that's more likely, that change is more likely to stick than if I give delayed feedback where we're done, we're talking, I tell them next time you can do this. They may remember that the next day, they may not, right? So delayed feedback is not as good as immediate feedback. Talked about that. Sometimes with the student, the environment, the activity, you have to give delayed feedback because if you're all up in their grill at the same time, it just doesn't work as well. We're always trying to demonstrate those desired skills, give lots of praise, suggest things that they can model. A lot of times I'm going in there and they may be doing a great job modeling, so I'm just thinking, what else can you do? I'm thinking, I'm on my iPad exploring, like, what if you got into this folder and did this, or you used this core word to just expand on what they're already doing. Help them focus on core words is a great thing. A lot of times we get focused on the folders. We want to find the things, the animals, the wild animals, the bear, right? When maybe instead we could just find big on the home page, and we don't have to dig through 7 folders to get there. We can help them. Sometimes what we're doing is feedback as well is just help them make tweaks in the activity. We had one student, we went in, Andrea and I, she's not here, but she's on our team, high school environment where the teacher had a pretty high functioning class actually. And so they were doing a literacy activity, and poor crew back there with his iPad was completely lost. He was completely checked out. There was no way we were going to get him to use his device, not because of the device, because of the activity. So instead of coaching, we just said, hey, what if we grab some picture books? And instead of him doing this activity that's way over his head and doesn't mean anything, he's checked out, what if we just read books with him and model for him? And they tried that, and it was like a 180-degree difference. So sometimes we're just making tweaks as coaches as well. And we can ask questions that prompt self-reflection. A really good question is, I wonder what you could have done here. I wonder what happened if you did this. I wonder, what do you think? Those kind of things. And setting goals and follow-up is always great. So here's what we've seen so far. We don't have hard data. That's The next thing we're working on is trying to work more actual physical concrete data into this, but just some anecdotal evidence we've seen. As we've tried to do this over the last couple of years, we've seen increased emphasis in classrooms on communication. Having strange people from the district all up in your business kind of lets people know that this AAC stuff is important. So that's been a really good thing for us to be there and be like, yeah, that device is important. We're making the time to be here. You should make the time to get it out and model on it. They're displaying increased knowledge and confidence of modeling and the students' devices. There's more buy-in. We're seeing just the devices are with students more. They're not sitting on the shelves as much. They're being used more frequently, which is awesome. And one of a side benefit we've seen is we as a team are just in classrooms more often than we used to be. And that's led to other good things, like we can suggest changes in environment and the activities. Like I talked about my high school student who needed an alternate reading activity. We can help with troubleshooting devices rather than wait for them to be like, yeah, I've been meaning to email you about this for 3 weeks. We're just there and we can take care of it right then.
Along with that, I think it's really good to think about bringing things with you too. Like when I went into a classroom, I was working with a kid that had a device, but I brought my lanyard and I brought just a simple board. And while I was there, the aide was like, well, what do I do when they're just hitting the button and they're doing it because they know it irritates me? And so then I was like, well, do you have any low-tech boards in your classroom? No, because they're all on devices. Oh, well, here's a low-tech. So now we're going to use your device because we're going to show you how to do the device. But here's this. You can still talk to us. We can do this. And then I was able to just leave that board there. And they were like, oh, that works so well. And then the next time I came back, they said, no, that works really well because then he can still communicate, he can still talk, but it gives it that minute break. And then he's learning to use it appropriately because he'd much rather have his device rather than an easier device. But it's also like bringing in things if you see things going on in the classroom, because they may not have time or energy, or they may not have the staff to bring the go sign for the doorway, but they're not unwilling to use it. But if you have the time to bring in some of those quick fire things with you, then it's a good way to kind of give them other options too.
Yeah, such a great point. So, and we just have better relationships as we're in there more often. So, okay, I will say this. It is 11:13 now. We're supposed to be done at 11:15. This is not ideal, but I'm going to try to get through this, and I may go over time a little bit. If you've got to go or if you're just done, I totally get it. And if you walk out, I'm not going to be offended at all. I promise. We'll still be friends. But I'm actually going to finish my last couple slides. I may go a little bit over. If you got a jet, I totally get it. No hard feelings at all. So a couple lessons we've learned. One thing is elementary and secondary classrooms just have to be approached differently. They're different beasts. The level of complexity in a secondary classroom with the schedule and more students and different range of abilities and peer tutors, they're just different. So some of the things that we've done in secondary classrooms to try to help is do more, offer some peer tutor training, especially maybe like at the beginning of a new trimester, or instead of trying to work with all of the paras in a classroom. It's not ideal, but sometimes we'll just come in and do like a 20-minute training with all of the paras at the beginning of the trimester, because then at least they've got something. And that's better than them having nothing at all, right? It's really important, if you can, to involve not just the classroom teacher, but your SLP and your SLT at the same time. So hopefully they're a team they're working with together, and we're avoiding that whole I only use this in the speech room kind of thing. Now there's buy-in and collaboration between the two. We tried where we said, okay, we've got a lot of different communication partners, but this one student using a device, so we're just going to go in and work with whoever's working with that student at that time. And that worked okay, but it wasn't as good as actually saying, no, I'm going to work with Sally Para for 3 weeks straight before I move on to Emily Para. It just works better that way. So whenever possible, it's better to choose one communication partner and focus on them rather than more of a like a scattershot approach, if that makes sense. And it's a really good idea to schedule more coaching visits than you might need, because people get sick, schedules fall through, all of a sudden you get 10 referrals that got dumped in your lap and you can't make it that week. Whatever it is, life happens, you got to be flexible. So those are some lessons we've learned along the way. And so then just to get you thinking about a couple of things here, how can you adapt this framework to your situation? You know, get to know your classrooms, get support from your administrators, know your limits as a team, don't take on too much at once, use your team members wisely. Like we said, we come together sometimes, we break apart other times, we try to figure out how to do that, which means that I have to train every member of my team to be an AAC expert. And I've got a brand new member this year that he's working with me. He's kind of like my sidekick coach, so he can become a coach on his own. Build capacity in one classroom before moving on. Use technology to help you cover more ground if you can. We've all done that now. We've lived through COVID. We know how to use technology. Do that when you have to. Let's see. We already kind of talked about that, but that's what I want to leave on. Is just I want to get you guys thinking about how could you adapt this to your situation. That's what I hope you leave with. Any questions, comments in the room or from virtual?
Also, just really quick. So this is awesome and coaching is great for classrooms and things, but also think about this kind of framework in your own building. You can't go in and train all your paras. I can't do it. But I have a really active custodian and I have a computer teacher that they stop my kids in the hall to talk to them. Not everybody does that, but those ones I know do. So I can use some of this with them, and then these kids are going to get some communication partners that already want to communicate with them. And you may not think of those people, and it may not be this full coaching thing, but think about pulling them in and being like, hey, can I show you how their device works and how I would talk to them, so that they kind of can start doing that too.
Like we said, we're trying to focus on the environment, changing that environment, that culture, influence student behavior through changing adult behavior first. So that's it if there's no other questions or comments. In the front here.
One of my questions is modeling. Should you have, like, if you're going to use like paper, should you have like a copy of like their pages, and so that you're modeling exactly what they're modeling, or just an AAC in general, like just using, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead and ask both questions.
So there's my first question. The second question is, let's say I have a student who has a device that he's been using for, I mean, let's see, he's in 8th grade, like since like 3rd grade, and it's difficult for him to use. I've seen other like programs that I think might work better. Would it be worth it to switch him to a different program, or to just keep working on that same thing that he's been working on, but he hasn't gone very far on?
Okay, okay. Cool. So I think as far as the modeling, it's great if you have the same system. It's great if you model on their system. Sometimes they say don't use their system. Depends on the kid. If the kid's higher level and using their system appropriately, then I would stay away and I would have my own. And it may be something totally different, or it may be the same. I think it can work either way. And with our lower kids, sometimes it helps if I'm modeling on theirs, because then they're learning where the button is, not from a picture over there, but you showed me where the button is on my screen. So I think you could do it either way. And as far as the other device, it depends on why they're having struggles. If they're having struggles because they're mad at the device and it hasn't been rewarding and engaging, I would stick with the device. If it's because mobility, they can't get the buttons, they can't see the buttons, then it may be time to change, but I'll give that one to Robert.
Yeah, that may be something that we need to discuss in more detail just afterwards. But yeah, really good guidelines there. Sometimes it's the device itself, and sometimes it's actually the way it's been supported or not supported. Online.
Online question came in right before hers. It came in right before hers. So if you remember, maybe you'll relate this to. So is this done by the AT team or the SLP team?
Yes. I don't care who's doing coaching, honestly. You know, whoever has the time and the passion and wants to. It would be awesome if both teams could do it, just whatever resources you've got to use, really.
And it depends on your team, which would be awesome too. It depends on your teams and how they're comfortable. We have an awesome team that has OTs and resource, and they've all jumped on board with AAC. But if your team is broken a little bit more, where you call in your OTs and your people for the motor concerns and not necessarily for the speech, then that might look differently because then they're coaching, they may not be comfortable coaching. So then UAT may have more time to set up classrooms and figure out who needs coaching. And then if you have SLP teams that are willing to go in and do the coaching. So I think that's part of it, will depend on what your team looks like.
I was just wondering, because we've been talking a little bit about this in our district too, and building capacity and the model of this coaching where this is much more focused on the student using AAC all day long versus the pull-out model where they're working with speech 30 minutes a week. They're not going to be doing acquisition. So I'm just wondering how your IEPs and your speech minutes reflect this model, if there's any changes or how you guys have adapted.
No, because we haven't used this as a goal. We just use this as we want these kids to communicate because it's going to help across everything and it's going to get that modeling out there. So I still have speech minutes. The kids still go to speech. They still have their speech IEP. This is just in addition. This is just so our classrooms are more confident, more comfortable, and our kids have better success. So it doesn't necessarily go to the IEP.
I'm just thinking like for our speech therapists about that, there's only so many minutes in a week. And so thinking about how they use their time, if we're building capacity with our SLPs, that's kind of where I'm thinking of how we think about how we use our minutes and look at the IUP.
And how we've done it, how we've done this coaching is we've had our UAT team do it. So we have SLPs that are on the team and do it, but we do it during our UAT time. It is part of that. So if we need to go out and coach and it's part of UAT, then we cancel groups, we get subs, we do other things because this is a little bit of a separate assignment. And we don't have a ton of time, but we have a couple hours of a week that we can use for this. And that's why we bring in the team, which has been good because they actually came into my school and my classroom. I didn't go coach my own classroom, and part of that honestly is true. If it's me telling, it's not the same as if a district person comes in and tells. So sometimes it's really nice to have a team come in to your school, even though we know that everybody in this room could probably do it. But if you have a team that can come in, then it's a little bit easier to bring in some other people. And then you're the support. And if you have questions day to day, then come ask me, but they're going to come in and work with you specifically. I'm just here for answering questions and helping during my speech times. Does that make sense?
As a team leader, I always wonder about how to most effectively use the time of the people I've got, because I know they've got caseloads and we made a conscious decision to kind of pull back on some other things to focus more on this, because we thought that this hopefully would be a higher leverage activity. So yeah, writing it into the IEP, things like that, there's a lot of different ideas and opinions and ways that people do that. But we've just kind of tried to approach it from a supplementary, yeah, we're just trying to support the whatever goals and services you've already got in place. Any thoughts from you guys back there on that question? Anything else?
But we've got really good buy-in from our teachers and our paras, because from what I've seen, the paras, when I go in, they're there. This is a hard job. They don't get paid enough. None of us get paid enough, but this is a hard job. And they're there because they love these kids and they want to communicate with them. So when we do this, it creates a better culture in the classroom. So I don't think it necessarily needs to be for an IEP. This is just support, and they really have been super receptive to it.
Sometimes I wish I could write an IEP goal for every kid with a device that actually is the para will do this. It's not the way it works, but that's kind of the backdoor approach we're taking a little bit. Yeah. Question in the back. Let me run you the mic.
Just more of a comment, but we had a class yesterday and maybe some people were in it, but you can write assistive technology training on as like a related service, and it's billable. Like if you're super interested in putting it on your IEP, that's maybe the way to go, and be like, this is what we're going to do. And then anybody could do it. So like your speech paras that are in the classroom could count that. And then like as it trickles down, when Medicaid gives us, instead of just the diagnostic codes, but the billable codes, they could put that in there. And that's a way that you could kind of implement that on their IEP if you choose to.
That's a really good comment, really good suggestion. Yeah,
We haven't done that, but you're right.
maybe we should.
It could be an AT support, and if you train the para, and then they're modeling something, it could be.
Yeah.
Then you have more paperwork.
So yeah. Okay, thank you guys. We're hoping to start a revolution here, and just, influence to change these cultures, really get these kids surrounded by support. So whatever you can do to help these kids get that support they need, it's hopefully what's going to pay off. We know, we see it already is. So thank you guys. And we're done. Conference is over.